Welcome to another brand new episode of CPOV Autographs. I, of course, am Matt, aka Stormageddon. Before we get into the new episode, I just want to mention my PAX East panel on the evolution of queer representation in gaming is now available in both the Fun and Games and Reignite podcast feeds. They both aired last Friday, or 2 Fridays ago, actually, now at this point. Time is weird. 2 Fridays ago. You can go to either feed to check them out, or you can go to certainpov.com. It was a really great conversation. I'd love for you all to hear it. But enough about that. This episode, I am chatting with Adam Lance Garcia and Steele Filipek, 2 incredible nerdy humans who I adore, who are responsible for both the Green Lama and the Queens of the Sapphire Sea radio shows, among tons of other really cool things that they work on. We got to chat about the evolution of the Green Lama, this first season that they did, the second season coming soon of Queens of the Sapphire Sea, and much, much more. So without further ado, here's my incredible conversation with these kings of audio, Steele Filipek and Adam Lance Garcia. All right, cool. Well, there's no real intro to this. I just kind of start. So, I'll cut most of what came before out, I guess, or I'll leave it all in. Who knows? I am really excited. Today on Autographs, I have 2 incredible humans, Steele Filipek and Adam Lance Garcia, 2 of the most incredible nerds on the internet. Adam's already doubting that intro a little bit.
Mostly because I don't think Steele's a human, so...
Oh, okay. That's fair. Steele and Adam, thank you for joining me.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
So I was really excited to have you both on because through our mutual friend Case Aiken, who had you all both on to talk about the Superman radio show, I learned of the Green Lama, which I'd heard a little bit from you, Adam, guesting in other places when we chat, but I finally decided to check it out and instantly fell in love with the radio show. It's so good. It's so fun. And so I had known, I guess my first question is for Adam, though Steele may have something to add. So Adam, I know you wrote some more recent Green Lama novels. And so when you were writing those novels, did you have any idea that you'd be able to actually ever produce a radio show for it? Or were these just separate things that happened to happen?
I always kind of wanted to do a radio show because the original creator, he did comics, he did novels, pulp novels, which is how he started, and a radio show. And I was very much, when I started writing, I'm like, I want to do all 3. I'm still actually today spent most of the day working on the 3rd novel, the 3rd full-length novel of the Green Lama. So I am still currently writing him. But yeah, writing and producing an audio drama was kind of a dream. And audio drama is a format that I desperately love. So when the option came around that we could do one, I jumped at the chance. And Steele was wonderful and supported me on that journey for some reason.
Well, I think, it was the way that you pitched it to me, Adam. We both really like audio drama as a format. We both grew up with a medium in the form of, for me, Dick Tracy and Ninja Turtles adventures, The Shadow. And the way that Adam pitched it to me was that it's a radio serial, but we're not going to do it in the way that it was done in the 1940s. We've got improved production methods. We're going to be doing it slightly more updated, but almost kind of timeless in a way. And the key phrase that he used for me was Batman the Animated Series, which is very evocative of the Fleischer cartoons of Superman, but are still modern. Ditto Indiana Jones, which is obviously taking a page out of those serials from the 1930s and 40s, but in an updated format. And so that's something that intrigued me, getting to do a classic superhero style radio drama in the format that I grew up with, but in a more modern way, a more modern take.
Yeah, that was something that was also true for when I even wrote the pulps, because for those of you who don't know, the Green Lama is a Buddhist superhero from the 1940s, and my dad collected him, which is how I found out about him. He had all the original comics. I was approached way back in the day to write a couple of novels, and my approach to it was how do I make this very old school thing speak to a new audience? And to Steele's point, Indiana Jones, Batman the Animated Series, those were touchstones for us because we really wanted to look for things that, feel timeless, feel classic, take the things that worked in the past but move them forward. Keeping them, homaging them, but never feeling so enamored by the originals that we lose sight of the actual storytelling. Something that happens a lot with like Sky Captain: The Worlds of Tomorrow, and if you ever listen to some even radio shows that are produced today, that they try so very hard to recreate the look, the sound, the feel of the original radio shows, that instead of becoming something new, they just, or even homaging, they kind of dip into parody, because everyone's like, let's go solve this crime. And it's like, okay, like it doesn't feel natural anymore. It doesn't feel real. So, the sort of modern approach was something that was just really exciting.
Yeah, that was something that we learned very early on. We started doing radio dramas together. I wouldn't say as a goof or a gag, but we did a 24-hour transmedia-a-thon. And one of the elements to it was a radio drama of one of Adam's characters, Doc Doyle, who is this very much kind of a Patrick Warburton chiseled jaw. It's strong enough that you could use it to chisel marble. What are you doing there, copper? Let me through these lines and let me solve this crime. And it was a lot of fun. And so I decided I wanted to write a script for this, just as kind of like a fun thing. And our editor, Noah DeBiase, he read the script and he's like, "This is really funny, Steele, but I think what you're doing wrong is that you're leaning too hard into the self-satire. If you treat it seriously and really try to work it from that angle, it'll come out so much funnier, because you'll be using it not kind of winking and fourth wall breaking, but you're evoking that era while at the same time bringing that modern sensibility to it. And that's kind of where that began to shift. That was 6 years ago, Adam. Can you believe that?
Jesus Christ. Yeah. I mean, before I get into like feeling how old we've become, I will say that that, and something that still is mentioned, like the evoking, something that we kept on talking a lot about during the early phases of this was we didn't want to create something that sounded like an audio drama from the 1940s. We wanted to create something that felt like you were listening to it in the 1940s, that you were a kid sitting right below the stereo and hearing this for the first time. And that's where the Indiana Jones aspect comes into it. I think that's the best thing that Lucas and Spielberg did, was how do we make something that made us feel the way we did when we saw those old movie serials? I grew up with those old movie serials because of my dad, and they're of a time and they're very interesting and to watch, and they're enjoyable in their own way. But, they don't feel the way that Indiana Jones feels to me, to watching that today. So that was what we wanted to do with the Llama, was basically, how do we make something that felt like you were a 8-year-old kid listening to an adventure back in the day? And, I think we generally succeeded.
Yeah, I mean, I really love it. I got hooked. And it's funny because I listen to a lot of podcasts, because as a podcaster, of course, what I want to do in my free time is listen to more podcasts, obviously. And so, but it's mostly talking head stuff like I've done, or comedy, narrative stuff. I can't do other things while listening to, because I want to focus in on the story. But once I started a new day job and started commuting, I was like, oh, this might be a good fit for the Green Lama. I've been wanting to listen. And from that first episode, from the opening moments, I got sucked in. What I love is that you guys play up the goofiness of what's inherent to this without playing it for laughs. The mobsters in the very first episode are so, they are cartoon characters, but they're taking every line they're saying seriously. The whole moment, the whole gunfight, all of it is super serious, and I love that. The Jethro DeMont in your radio series actually reminds me a little bit of the MCU Howard Stark from Captain America. He's got that socialite kind of sound to him, and I love that. It comes through so clear. I can already picture what this guy looks like. I know the kind of person he is. And then the sound effects, the whole hospital scene in the first episode, I was blown away. I felt it. So I guess my next question is, when doing the production on this stuff, when creating the vibe of it, how did you guys do that? Because obviously, I don't think, at least, you're sitting in a Foley room making noises. So how do you do it in a digital age but still make it sound authentic to the 40s?
Yeah, the first thing that happens, you need to have great actors, and you need to have actors that understand the medium. It's very much like a cartoon, and that all the acting has to come from the voice. And so if you listen to the better audio dramas that are out right now, it's a thing called the roller coaster. If you listen to someone talk naturally, their voice goes up and their voice goes down, and they kind of go all over the place. And a good actor will be able to evoke that, to be able to speak in that such a way, but also carry a little bit of depth, be able to lead the audience on a journey with their vocal range. So it's not just having a good voice. It's not just sounding like the character. It's really hitting those notes. And some people really get it and they understand it after you describe it. And other people, it's like, I'm not going to name names, but sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get them to try and hit that. And it's hard because you don't want to tell an actor, you've got to say a line like this and you got to say a line like that. You want to respect them. And so you have to find people who are really, really good at pulling that off. And the second thing is that, for Adam's series, we worked with an amazing editor. I'll let Adam speak to that. But there are so many more resources available now. In the old days, in the days of yore, you literally had a live Foley artist who would make all those sounds. Now you have freesound.org is what I use for my series, which is Queens of the Sapphire Sea. And there are lots of open source and Creative Commons sound effects that you can use to create this whole world. And so it's a tricky thing because you have to tell the story via the dialogue and with a little bit of music and a little bit of sound effects. Something that someone told me when I was first starting out, I wish I could remember who did. They said it's a lot like a watercolor. If you do a little bit and you paint over it, it becomes this beautifully evocative image. If you do it too much, it becomes really muddy. Too many sounds, too many voices, too many things going on. It all just kind of steps on each other. So, I always, when I start out writing, I just write the first draft, but then I go back in and literally, read the lines aloud and try and see it with my ears, so that when we record it, it's not there's no question about where this is, what's going on, who's speaking. It's a little tricky because it can be on the nose, You sometimes have to make a direct reference to a knife that someone's holding in their hand, or a door slamming, or that we're in a hospital, and those kind of things would come across very hammy in a television series or in a film, but they're required. And if you go back and look at some of the classic television from the 50s, particularly The Lone Ranger, the writers of which were from the radio series, you watch those first few episodes, it's very radio. They're saying things that you're seeing. And it takes a little while for them to get into, we don't need to say that anymore. We can just show it. And that's a learning process that a lot of writers in audio drama have to go through, us included, that there are some things that you have to kind of beat out of yourself or rebeat into yourself. The example that I use in classic screenwriting, you don't want to use a person's name all the time because it becomes so repetitive and it's not the way that people speak. But in an audio drama, you sometimes do need to ground that when someone's speaking a line because it helps to ground the audience in that. And so it's a little bit of a learning process there.
Yeah, and I'll start with like the acting, like John Marco Ceresi, who plays Jethro Dumont, is an incredibly talented voice actor. He probably would disagree because he's a really great comedian. He's a really funny comedian. It's actually kind of obnoxious how handsome, how tall, and how funny he is. What a jackass. He's just so handsome and funny. But he's a really great voice actor, and he's able to sort of get that range. He comes in, he just knows what he wants to do. But in terms of like the sound design, we worked with to Steele's point, we worked with a really talented sound designer named Josh Wilson, and a really great musician named Brian Batolius, who I think you might know. And what was great about Josh was we went to him and said, what I love about what my favorite audio dramas are the ones that feel like they have a full soundscape. I like the idea of like as if, and this is partially because I also listen to a lot of Doctor Who audio dramas, but this sense of someone has watched a TV show and they put the tape recorder right in front of the TV and you're listening to the audio recording of a TV show or of a movie or whatever. So I really wanted to have that sort of full soundscape, have it feel as real as possible. Something that a lot of audio dramas, a lot of American audio dramas do today are very light on their sound design. I was listening to like one from Audible, which I won't name for a number of reasons, but it was like, the voices were whispering and it was all like you never heard like footsteps or you never had the ambience of like the space, or you never had a sense of scale, and to Steele's point, like it is you have to sort of balance that, because sometimes it becomes too much. I think one criticism that someone gave to me about the llama, it was fair, is like there's this one scene in episode 4 where if I didn't have the footsteps in that, he would have sounded like this character's running over, but because there were footsteps, they weren't fast enough, so it didn't sound like he ran as fast. Totally fair criticism. And I think that is, it's trying to make it feel as real and as if it's as authentic as possible, but never like getting too much, because the moment it becomes too much, it gets weird. I will say Josh was astounding at sound design. There are some things that he does. One of my favorite things he did in episode 7 was there's this scene where like these characters like fall off the side of a building, get hit by a car, and roll for a couple of feet. And he actually somehow made that auditorily plausible. Like I actually can see it when I hear it. And that man deserves all the money. He's amazing.
I mean, what I love about the show already, what I love about old superhero stuff is the bits. Like, I love a good bit. I mean, Adam knows this. Half of his Twitter is bits.
Yes.
So we relate in that way. I was generous by saying only half.
75.
But like, like in the Green Lama, like whenever he answers the theme, the whoosh, like the wind effects reminds me very much and is visceral to me as the old black and white Superman TV show and the crashing through the wall in every scene. Like it has that impact to me in audio form. Like my favorite montage you can find, I think it's of George Reeve, like from the old Superman TV show, just him bursting through walls with effect. Like there's montages on YouTube of it, and just seeing them back to back, it's like, this is ridiculous, but it's great. It portrays Superman, and like I got that feeling every time the Green Lama entered the scene just from the audio.
And to that, what's interesting with the whoosh is that we went back and forth a lot on what that sounded like, and I think there's a style. I mean, I think it's a stylistic choice that we debated, but basically, I was very much like keep it grounded. Like I want to hear like the fabric rustle in, have him go in there. But like there was some earlier version, it was like it's still in there every so often. But there was an effect that Steele did on one episode that was really good. It was like, and it shot up, and it was really great. But it was like that's not the feel for what I particularly wanted in this series. It was, again, I say this as like, it was like, that's like really cool. It's not what I want, because I felt like what would help sell this is if it kept it, for as ridiculous as the story was going to be. There's a guy named the Green Lama who's a Buddhist in the 1940s that shoots electricity and flies. Like, that's absurd enough as it is. Let's keep everything as grounded as possible, so that when we do get weird, like we do in the finale, like it's like we kind of built towards that moment, if that makes sense. I think a lot of times with a lot of audio dramas, like they lean so heavy into the sci-fi-ness of it, because the great thing about audio is you can do anything. Like you can do anything for like 1/100th of the budget. Like I can tell a Star Wars movie in like for $10,000 for 8 episodes, and it's going to sound great. But like I think sometimes like they just kind of forget the reality of it, because they lean so heavily into the weird.
And speaking to that, I recommend to all my students I teach writing, to try an audio drama, because it's a way of creating a season's worth of content of television for a fraction of the price, and if you're really smart about it, yes, it's a different medium. It has its limitations. It has its own vocabulary, but it's a way to, create a season's worth of storytelling, and get people engaged, build out an audience, and at the very least, just kind of get your feet wet and continue to create content that can really go anywhere and do anything, so long as you are really good with dialogue. And also not just like Quentin Tarantino level, but understanding how to use dialogue to create this world, to spill it out there, and to get the audience's eye, using their ear to see the world out there. And we've done, we've done a modern superhero horror story with our co-producer Tyrant Rex. We did Queens of the Sapphire Sea, which is mine, which is a seaplane pilot adventure comedy, very, very close to Porco Rosso if you're a Hayao Miyazaki fan. Obviously, we're doing The Green Lama, which is classic superhero in the 40s. We've done Doc Doyle, which is pulp. We did Smoke Without Flame, which is alternate history period piece. So it has mysteries in there. You can do anything that you would like in the audio space, and all it takes is imagination and a good audio setup. You need to have really, really crystal clear audio.
Yeah, and that to that last point, like, you would not believe, like, there are certain episodes that we've recorded certain actors multiple times because it's weird. Like, you'll hear it sounds fine, and then the moment like you put them all together, it's one character doesn't work, the entire audio drama completely falls apart. That is something that, like, I think a lot of people just don't really realize, like, how important the quality is. So when you asked us earlier, like, how did we record this? So almost everybody was recorded separately. Like, all this was recorded during the pandemic. Many remotely. Vast majority was remote, like literally across the country. Some people in Virginia. There was actually one gentleman in Morocco that we, and then there was like one of our main characters, Mark Bradley Miller, who plays Ken. He was alternately in Atlanta and New York and here in upstate New York, everywhere. So getting clean audio was like the biggest thing, the moment, because as long as you have good audio, you can really do anything.
And it's not just clean audio; it's the audio setup. If everybody sounds the same or has a very similar setup, even if the audio quality is a little lesser, at least it all kind of sounds the same. But if you have one person who has a crystal clear voice and a great mic and everything's silent, and then everybody else is of different qualities, it really comes through. And it's one of those things. I never thought I'd be an audio guy, and now when I hear something, it just bugs the heck out of me. Like, it just, oh my God, there's just a slight echo, and people say, you can't hear it. And I'm like, but I can hear it, it's driving me insane.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I've been producing and recording podcasts for a long time, and like, it could be the thing I want to listen to more than anything else. And if there's like a static crinkle, or like if there's like, it's like nails on a chalkboard for me now. Like, I don't mind if there's room tone on a podcast or an audio drama, but it's when there are obvious audio issues that literally there are idiot-proof tools now to remove that kind of stuff. Like, that's what drives me crazy. Like, Isotope has changed my life. Like, even recording that is done on like a dinky Yeti, not that there's wrong with Yetis, but like, they are not the top tier of quality, but I can clean that up using Isotope and make someone sound like they're in a broadcast booth. And like, I think once you get used to hearing that quality of audio, it's hard to kind of go backwards.
Agreed. Also, I think for anybody who's listening and is interested in this, don't go for the cheapest. There's a huge qualitative difference between the cheapest and, say, double that price. Your mic is your camera. Go for a really good mic. If you don't have a room that does, if you have a room that has some issues with reverb and whatnot, get an IsoVox, or get, you could also just set up a few pieces of plywood and a quilt, and that'll cut down like 90% of those issues. But the mic and hopefully the board, those are things that you should kind of splurge a little bit on. And I say splurge, I just mean don't go for the lowest bidder. Like, try to go the next level up, and it's so much better. And then at a certain point, it becomes law of diminishing returns. And yes, audiophiles will say, "Oh, you can hear the difference, in this $1,000 microphone and this $1,500 microphone." And I'm like, even me, who's becoming this way, like, yeah, you can, but not to the level, particularly if you're just trying to learn the form and everything.
Yeah, and I like, and also like recording in your closet can go a long way. If you're really you pay for the mic, pay for the stand, pay for like something to like record it on. But if you don't want to spend $1,000, like somebody it did, and I'm not naming names, but it wasn't Steele. On an IsoVox, as I love my isovox. It's changed my life in terms of recording because you can have someone just kind of come in, put their head in this booth, and it's there, and then you just collapse it all and put it away. It's great. But like if you don't want to spend $1,000, a duvet goes a really long way, or just recording in your closet because you have all that insulation just already kind of built in, and it's your clothing.
Yeah, totally. And like I have an RE20 that I've had for years and years and years, and it does most of the work for me, especially for like podcasts. Like a little room tone is fine. Like, and because the room I'm in now is more closed in, it's like it doesn't bounce as much. But like when I was using older like condenser mics and stuff like that, it's like just the extra. You're absolutely right. The little bit more money goes a long way with recording equipment. But enough about the audiophile nerding out. So we're going to come back to the Green Lama in just a minute. But before we do that, I do want to talk about some of the other individual projects y'all have both worked on for Radio Room, which I assume where most of the audio drama stuff is under. You've been talking about this incredible pilot drama, Steele. So I'd like to know a little bit more about it, because this just feels like it would be very different from the Green Lama because, for one, you've got airplanes. So talk a little bit about that show and like how that's different for creating a soundscape versus kind of like just a street fighting kind of rough and tumble superhero show.
Yeah, so my show is called Queens of the Sapphire Sea, and Adam has actually written several episodes and co-produced. That's how Radio Room started out. We two and Tyrant Rex came together, and we just wanted to kind of help each other out, produce each other's work, alleviate some of the burden. And so this was a project that I've been working on for a while. It started out fantasy, but it was always very heavily influenced by I mentioned Porco Rosso from Hayao Miyazaki, but also Tailspin, and these kind of and DuckTales and these classic Disney adventure stories. And that's what I wanted out of it. I wanted a kind of a very daring-do, swashbuckling, witty repartee, rat-a-tat-tat, back and forth style fun show, something that you could turn on, and yes, there would be depth, but it was a lot of witty ripostes. And so that eventually evolved into Queens of the Sapphire Sea, which is about an aunt and her niece who are these seaplane pilots, mercenaries for hire in the French Riviera in the interwar years, 1930s to be specific. So you have Belle Bernassi, who is the cigar smoking, hard drinking fighter pilot, and her niece Madeline, who is this kind of bright-eyed, more innocent figure, at least at the beginning. And together they take down seaplane pirates. They fight fascists. They storm a stronghold outside of Monaco. Very much, fists flying, guns blazing, that whole kind of feel to it. And there are 11 episodes out right now, so you get a full season of content. We're currently finishing the second half of the second season, but there's a lot. They're mostly standalone. There is a little bit of serialization to it, but much more so than the Green Lama, which is soft serialized but builds on each episode. You can kind of take each individual episode, with the exception of the two-parters, as its own thing, so you can kind of get your feet wet there. For that, it is it is up in the sky, it's down in the sewer, it's on the beach. What I wanted was to try to get as much of that European feel to it. So one episode will be in Monaco, the next episode will be in Venice, the next episode will be in the episode 205, which we're working on right now, is in Gibraltar. And so you hear the waves lapping, you hear the wind in the air, and you have the engine. And because it's the 1930s, there are these things that kind of evoke the era, this kind of radio feel. They don't have radios to speak to each other at the beginning. They have to talk through a talk tube, and so that you kind of have to describe that. And it creates a very unique kind of setting, and where you have to tell the story amidst the over the engines, over the gunfire, and because of that, it can get muddy. And that, particularly, and I'll be completely honest, I learned a lot in the first few episodes of that show. Learning how to create a soundscape that evokes a lot and can tell that story, and it's a lot of fun. The two main characters, they go back and forth. It's I wouldn't say it's an odd couple, and because they love each other and they're very, they're very pushy in their own different ways. But that was something that I wanted to do. It's just like it's about dialogue as much as it is guns. It's about these two people who love each other but don't always see the world the same way, and that's where the conflict comes from. I think that's for me. Those are the kind of stories that I love. At the end of the day, it's about conflict. It's about characters. It's about. I mean, I'm a plot guy. I do like plot. I start with the plot, but if the characters can't carry a scene, it doesn't matter how evocative the soundscape is. It has to be grounded in the dialogue. It has to be grounded in those two characters.
And I will say, like, having written, I think, 4 episodes for Queens of Sapphire, like, they're the most fun to fucking write. Like, I love that. Like, and I'm not saying it because he's here, but because I've said it to him when he's not. I've said it when he's not here. It's one of my favorite series to write for. Both Belle Bernassi and Madeline, who are played by Catherine Frey and Sarah Smithson, they're just so much fun to write. Like, the banter, you could just like back and forth, and they're witty as fuck, and it's just so entertaining to write. And so the tailspin aspect of it, like there's these high flying adventures, these just impossible odds. My first episode was which one was this? 104, right? It was what was the name of that episode?
X marks the spot.
Yeah, and that was basically like, what if Indiana Jones was Belle Bernassi's ex-boyfriend, and he shows up and like they get stuck on this adventure, and it's like, God, I love that episode. I think that's my favorite of all the ones I've written. But it's you get to do these really fun, high-flying, like ridiculous adventures. With two female leads who are just so fat. I love them. I love, and again, I'm not just saying that because he's here, but I love Belle and Madeline so much. I really can't wait to get back to them.
It helps that the actors are so good, and Catherine Frey and Sarah Smithson have met each other twice. They've really only been in the same room for a few hours. And on one hand, that makes it hard because you have to record, separately, and you have to hope that the takes come out great. But if you find great actors who just know and get the character, once we heard both Sarah and Catherine come in and do the readings, it was just night and day from the other performers. There were some really good performers. I don't mean to denigrate them, but they really just enveloped the role. I can't imagine. We had to recast one actor because of availability, which I hate to do in audio because it's so much of a vocal-driven show. But for Sarah and Catherine, I'm not sure I could do the show without them at this point. They really embodied the show.
They're just astounding actresses, and just the vocal range they have is amazing. There's one episode I did for season 2 where they play their own doppelgangers, and oh God, and the only reason I did it was because I'm like, I know they can handle it. I knew that they could do it, and Catherine does this voice.
She goes so New York, she is.
It was so good. It's just like, but it's great. Like, you just have this moment of like them talking to themselves. It's like 4 characters, 2 actresses, and it's just like, holy crap. They're so good. They're just so good.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm excited to check that show out. I've been meaning to for a while, but I'm curious. Actually, this leads me to my next question for you, Adam. I still haven't read it yet, but I bought it. You wrote Sherlock Holmes and the Green Lama.
Yes.
And I want to know a little bit about that because that just feels so it just feels like such a fun thing to do. And I just want to know how that came to be. And then talk a little bit about how it's different to write for novels versus audio dramas and like the difference.
So for Sherlock Holmes, the Green Lama, I've been writing the Green Lama for a few years by that point. I've written a couple of novels. I'd written I've written a few novellas, a bunch of short stories for Moonstone Books, which is my publisher. And Joe Gentle, who came to me and he's like, look, what if you do like a Sherlock Holmes Green Lama story to help like promote the Green Lama? Basically, like everyone's going to buy a Sherlock Holmes book because it's Sherlock Holmes. What if you do a story? And I was like, that's a terrible idea. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I just don't know how to do it. Because he originally suggested something along the lines of having them both solve a crime in two different time periods. And he had done that before with Sherlock Holmes and Kolchak, the Night Stalker, which, I think it's a good storytelling device, but it wasn't something that I was particularly interested in doing. But then I remember very vividly, I was like going to bed, I couldn't fall asleep, and I remembered that the Green Lama, in the canon of the original pulps, it is established that Richard Foster, the pseudonym of the creator Kendall Foster Crossan, so Richard Foster, in the canon of the pulps, received 14 monographs, or a number of monographs from the Green Lama, and he was turning them into pulps. So within the actual canon, there's these essays of Jethro Dumont going on adventures. And I've established over the course of my books that these are the stories I'm telling are the ones that weren't turned into that were monographed, but they're not the ones that are that were ever given to Richard Foster. So I'm like, well, okay, if these monographs exist, so what if all these Sherlock Holmes stories are told from the point of view of Watson? They're all first-person Watson stories. So what if I did something like that, where Jethro Dumont was the Watson to Sherlock Holmes? Then it fit into the canon of the original Green Lama, being this lost adventure that you never saw, but it still fits because it's a monograph. That's why we never saw it. He just never gave it. But also could sort of mimic the canon of Sherlock Holmes without me requiring me to sort of find a way to match Doyle's voice. I realized that I can't ever match Arthur Conan Doyle's voice like that. It's very distinct. There are some authors who can. I can't. So it gave me the allowance to tell a Sherlock Holmes story in the Sherlock Holmes format without needing to get into the Sherlock Holmes voice. What I needed to do is make sure that Sherlock Holmes sounded like Sherlock Holmes, that he felt like Sherlock Holmes, but never felt into fan service. I never wanted him to say, and he never does, elementary, my dear Dumont, because he never said that in the original stories, so we can't do that. And then, there was a question of, well, there's a time problem. The fact that, a lot of Holmes' stories are the late 1800s, early 1900s, and is he alive? And I kind of came upon this idea of what if, again, using the canon of both stories, that this is Jethro Dumont's on the way back from Tibet to America, and he's making a stopover in London because he needs to get his affairs in order. That's not something that's essentially established, but it makes sense. He has to get back from Tibet to New York, so it makes sense for him to stop in London. And in that, he doesn't become the Green Lama until he lands in New York. He doesn't decide to become this vigilante until he gets there. So here's this story of a character, of a superhero, right before he becomes a superhero, a hero. At the same time, we have Sherlock Holmes, which is he's let's say he's alive. What this book presupposes is maybe he's alive. So he's we have an elderly Sherlock Holmes post all these adventures, and he's come back to London to solve a crime. So I knew that I couldn't kill Sherlock Holmes. Spoilers, he doesn't die. I don't have the right to do that. I'm not that skilled of an author to tell that story. And also, it would be weird to do it in a Green Lama story. So I felt it would be really, really interesting to have this story of a sunset sunrise, of these two characters meeting at a point after his adventures had ended and right before the other characters' adventures had started. And I became very enamored with that idea. It's one of my favorite stories. I mean, Steele was very kind enough to help me sort of he proofread it a couple times to make sure that it worked, because I read every single Sherlock Holmes story before I finished that novel, because I really wanted to make sure that I got Holmes's voice down. And again, that's a big thing. It's I didn't want him to say or do things that were mimicry. I wanted it to feel like he sounded like Doyle wrote him. So yeah, that's how it came together. It's it also I was able to use other bits of canon from both, where it's established that Holmes goes to Tibet at some point and he met the head lama. What if he happened to have met Jethro Dumont's Master. Like, you could just have that established in there. It was I love that. I really do love that story. I don't know. I hope you like it. I know I loved it. It's one of those books I look back on. I'm like, and this happens a lot with writing novels or writing anything. There are some things like you think are great and you look back like, what the fuck was I doing? This is definitely one of those that I look back on, and that and another story I'm like, yeah, those are things that I'm really proud of, because I just, especially with the Holmes Lama story, I just didn't think it was going to work. I'm like, there's no way this can work.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm glad that you were able to make it work. I love a good crossover. Like, who doesn't love a crossover episode? But like, so obviously you've written a lot of novels. You've done a lot of work with superheroes and other things. How did that translate to writing for audio drama? Because I imagine it's very different from trying to put together a novel.
It's very different. Like I say, as I've been working for like almost 5-6 years on the current novel that I'm writing right now. I find writing audio dramas easier. Writing dialogue is one of my strong suits. So, it's so dialogue driven that you can just focus on what the characters are saying. You can focus on their interactions. You can focus on their arcs, and then you can and it sounds like this, and this is what it sounds like. You don't need to worry about like describing everything around them. Writing prose is very challenging, for me at least. I say that as like, I love it. I absolutely adore it, every single second of it. But it's because I sometimes like write the dialogue first, and then I go in, I'm like, okay, this is what happens. This is how it happens. And how do I do it in a way that makes it sort of feel natural? I mean, I've been very lucky, over the course of my career. And though Steele has a bigger writing career than I do, but for me, I've been able to write in prose and audio drama. I've written some stuff for screen, and I have a few comic books under my belt. And every format, every different format has its unique things that you can't do in other things. Like, I think, for example, like comics are perfect for silence. You can't do silence in prose. You can't do silence. You can do silence in audio drama, but like, it doesn't work. And I learned that the hard way. I tried to do silence in audio dramas. It doesn't work. But you can do silence in a comic because all you see is that image, and you don't hear anything. You don't see anything. It's just, you don't have like word balloons explaining the science. It's just silence. So there's different unique challenges for every single thing I've done, but like, that has made me a better writer because I understand like what works and what doesn't.
Steele, what about for you? I feel like, obviously you've ran the gamut as well. Do you feel like there's a format that's easier for you than others, or it's just like Adam's kind of saying, like each one is just a unique challenge?
Each one is definitely a unique challenge. I will absolutely agree with that. I was saying, about dialogue in audio drama, you have to really like the spoken word to do audio drama, or podcasts for that matter. Just dialogue and back and forth and cadence and language, but spoken language. For a novel, for the written word, there is a lyricism to that is different. Harlan Ellison would say you should always read your stuff aloud to hear it. I think that's good advice, but I also think that the printed word has its own kind of beauty, and there's definitely a difference there. Ditto for screenwriting, which is about writing something for the visual image, but there is also, every writer worth their salt will tell you that you have to compose a script in a certain way in order to catch the reader's attention, be that an agent or an actor or a director or a financier or anybody. It's not just creating a really good story. But also they will say that sometimes the best scripts, the best screenplays, in terms of like the best written ones, don't always turn out to be the best films. There's a reason why some of the scripts that have been bought from the blacklist, they wind up to be, I'll be charitable, mediocre movies, because they are really good on the page, but then once you translate them to the screen, it doesn't quite work out. Each format has its own strengths and its drawbacks. I wouldn't say flaws. There are things that you, as Adam said, that you can't do or should not do in certain spaces. In the written word, you can you can get away with long stretches of soliloquy and internal thoughts. I'm not the biggest fan of those, but there are lots and lots of books. And read anything by Thomas Pynchon, where there's lots of, oddities that you wouldn't get away with. These unfilmable novels. Well, of course, because they're not designed to be filmable. They are novels that exist like that. In the same way that comic books, as Adam spoke to, have their own kind of cadence. They are also a visual medium. I have my own independent comic book called Arcane, which is kind of YA. It's young adult Lovecraft, very influenced by Parasite and Mighty Max from the old cartoons, and
hell yeah.
And it's and you can find the first issue on Comixology, and you can find the first two to buy from print from Cosmic Lion Productions, and the third issue is coming out soon. And in that, there was an issue where I had a page where there was dialogue and like some special effects, sound effects rather, and I was going through it and I realized it just works so much better without it. The audience can fill in their own space. I think that that's a big part of every medium. There are some things that are shown or revealed, and there are some things that are held back that can't be shown. In audio drama, it's the visuals. In a film or in a television show, there is the stuff that the camera shows, and there's stuff that isn't, and the audience fills the rest in, and that's a part of every medium. What is the stuff that is shown? What is the stuff that is not shown, or can't be shown? And learning how to use both effectively, I think, is the way that one goes from being a decent writer to being a good writer.
I'm so glad you mentioned Mighty Max, because I always feel like that cartoon was a goddamn fever dream. Like, I don't know if you've gone back and watched it recently, and I love Rob Paulsen. I've been a diehard Rob Paulsen fan my whole life, but like, that show is so weird. It just shouldn't work, and yet I still love it even as an adult, even though it is so odd.
It has I'm gonna go on this because I talk about this all the fucking time, because I would kill to write a new Mighty Max series, because it ends that season. For those of you who don't know, it ends in a loop. So for those of you who don't know, Mighty Max, the series finale, basically has some of the best sort of retconning, but like taking up an episodic storyline and making it a serialized. Basically, they revealed that all the adventures that Mighty Max had been on had all been prophesized in this wall that we never saw in this layer, where like everything was going to happen, and now we're reaching the end, and shit's going to get real. And like, there's one that's like curtain, because it's like the death of a character, and like everything goes wrong, and then there's white, and they're like, why is that one blank? And like, we don't know what happens after this. That's where shit gets real, and everything that's prophesized happens. And then it ends with Mighty Max, because his power of the Mighty One is to wear the hat and go through a portal. He goes to the portal one last time, and he wakes up at the beginning of a series. And this show's in syndication. This show is built, and for those of you who are too young to remember this, like, shows just used to like sometimes play over and over and over and over and over again on UPN at like 9 o'clock in the morning for years. And so every time you would watch Mighty Max, like, you get to the finale, and the next episode, like, because it's Monday, they ran out of episodes, it's the first episode again. And it always works. It'll never stop not working. It's kind of depressing when you think about it, this kid's stuck in this infinite loop. But that was the fucking genius. I love that to this day.
I have a Rob Paulsen story, because I got to work on Ninja Turtles from the early aughts. I think that's the early teens.
Oh, that's right, yes.
And he did the voice of Donatello. And so I, with the company I was working for at the time, Starlight Runner Entertainment, I wrote an inventory episode. We also did story world design for it. We helped do the transmedia for it. And so we got to go to a cast reading of the pilot episode. And
amazing. Rob
Paulsen's there, and I loved Mighty Max growing up. And so after it, I'm typically not very fanboy. I've met so many celebrities, and after you meet enough of them, they're regular people. Some of them are. But I had to talk to him, and I was like, hey, Mr. Paulsen, I'm sorry if this is a little unprofessional, but I just wanted to say I loved Mighty Max growing up, and I loved, you as Max. And without missing a beat, he goes in his Rob Paulsen voice, "We have to stop Skullmaster!" And I was like, ah! For 10 seconds, it was like I was back to being 9 years old again. And to hear him do that voice, and just immediately, get it. It was so awesome. Those are the moments. You don't get a ton of them. There's a little bit when you go into entertainment. The drapes are pulled back, and you see the inner workings, and the magic is a little lost. It's like turning 10 and finding out that Santa Claus isn't real. But then there are a few times when there are some moments, and it makes them that much more precious because it's real. You get a moment like that, and it reconnects you to that childhood wonder you had while watching or experiencing these things.
Yeah, completely. I mean, Rob is also one of the sweetest men I've ever met. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times, and he's always you are the most important person at that time in that moment whenever you're around him. He cares about his fans. He cares about his work. And like, he played my favorite Ninja Turtle, which is Raphael, the correct answer to the who's your favorite Ninja Turtle question. It's always Raphael. But like, I love those stories, and you're right. They are few and far between. And like, I've worked in theater and done a ton of stuff, and like, most people are very nice, but like, for the most part, like, those iconic moments don't happen that often. I've told it on the podcast once before, but I got to meet, the voice of Superman, Tim Daly. And like, after the production was done and after we were just at the after party relaxing, I got to tell him that he's the voice of Superman to me. When I read comics, I hear his voice, and he was so kind and so sweet. And like, you've seen the videos online of him welcoming people to the Superman Club. Like, he loves that franchise. And I think what's great about voice acting and radio plays and cartoons above other medium for me is like, there just seems to be this magic to voice work that just, I don't want to say it doesn't exist in live action film. Of course it does, but I feel like there's something different about voice acting and voice medium versus other stuff.
There's an intimacy that you don't get with other mediums because, for the most part, you're listening to it with the headphones on, and these people are speaking directly into your ear, so, especially these days where you can listen to everything on your iPad or your iPhone or your Android, like, you can sort of, like, it's there right here on these cans around your ear, and you're the only one who's hearing them. You're the only one in that space with them. Something that we did with the season finale, Josh put it in Dolby Atmos. And that allows you to have this sort of very immersive experience where you hear things moving around you. You hear these people walking up next to you, running past you. I would say the only thing closest to that might be virtual reality. And even then, like, there's sort of like I don't know, for me at least, a disconnect, because with virtual reality, like, you're always aware that, like, you can only move so far. Like, there's a limit to the space that you can inhabit unless, like, it's built in, like, a maze or whatever, like an experience that you can kind of walk around, or like something like Sleep No More, which is a sort of an experiential theatrical event here in New York. But with audio drama, it's like they're literally speaking to you. You are there next to them in a way that I don't think you can ever really get in other media. Like, Steele's raising his hand. Steele, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that Stephen King, in his book on writing, talks about how writing is a form of telepathy. That you put down a house on the page, and the house that the writer is creating is different than the house that the reader is imagining in their head. And he talks about, like, how there is that shared space. It's different but the same. And the same way with audio. It's purely vocals and audio effects. And so when a good actor and a good soundscape evoke a 1940s Manhattan or 1930s French Riviera, there is a particular space that is shared by the creators in that. And the difference between, as Adam said, the written word and in audio is that for however long that audio drama lasts, you're in that space, and your inner eye is seeing that in the way that it is being created. You are casting the actors in your eye. You are filling out the space. And so it does create this really unique place that people can go to, can visit in that span of time.
And there's also, like, the what I've always really appreciated, because I run and listen to audio dramas quite frequently. That's sort of like my zen. I go for a run, I listen to an audio drama. And some of the most effective ones are where, like, when I think there's something behind me, or like a bug flies by me, or there's a helicopter above me. And this happens quite a bit, where I'll stop and I look for the helicopter, or I'm like start going like I'm waving. I'm like, this is great. I'm saying on a podcast, like I'm waving my hands around, like get the bug away. Or one of my absolute favorite audio dramas was a Torchwood episode from Big Finish, and it literally was two people in a car, and there's something behind them in the seat behind them, and the entire time, the way the audio is done, you hear it right behind you, and it's the closest I've ever. I don't think I've ever listened to it again, but it was terrifying because it's like I could hear it, I could feel this thing behind me, because the way they designed the audio was like as if you were like the mic was in the middle of them in the car, and you just heard this thing whispering behind you, and it fucked with you. So you can't really do that in really kind of, unless like it's an immersive live theatrical experience, you really can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I play a lot of video games, and I found when video games do it right, they can scare the bejesus out of you in a similar way, but it's never the visual. It's always the audio. Like, I made the mistake once of streaming Dead Space on Halloween in the dark at night, because the people who follow me were like, oh, that'd be fun. What they meant was it'd be fun to watch you be terrified. And like there were scenes where like it was, I'm wearing big over the ear cans like Adam alluded to earlier, and like the way the sound design, it's like I could feel things behind me and I would freak the hell out. I love when you're put in a space based on sound. Visuals can do it, but it's sound that really brings you there. The scariest movies and the most intense films and audio dramas are the ones that really utilize the sound. And they're my favorite thing because you really feel like you're in the space. So before we wrap up, I would love to know, with the Green Lama, what's next? So there's a season out where you can listen, and I have admittedly not finished it quite yet, but I'm loving it so far and plan to. But I'm curious, as you've already announced that Queens of the Sapphire Sea has season 2. Like, what is next for the Green Lama and his adventures?
So coincidentally, we actually started talking about that this week. I needed to take a moment so I can start getting a little bit deeper into the Green Lama novel that I'm writing. But Steele and I did take a moment this week to start laying that out, because there's Steele, I'm gonna get too deep into explaining this, and I'm gonna get too deep nerd on my own stuff. So what would you say is next? Actually, how do you, without giving spoilers, where we leave things at the end of season 1?
So there is definitely, I wouldn't call it a cliffhanger per se, but a lot of things are wrapped up, but not everything is wrapped up. There are some villains who got away. There are some things that happened to our heroes that need to be taken into account. There is a new status quo, and so now we are breaking down season 2 to figure out just how much are we going to allow to exist in the audience's mind, how much we're going to be answering, coming back. Speaking of coming back, the characters who are coming back, we started this with the post-World War II, the Green Lama, and so there were certain things that we wanted to touch upon, both thematically and plot-wise. Soldiers are returning home. There is a quote-unquote new normal. The country is still very much, in shock after what has happened. Quote-unquote happy days are here again, but people tend to forget all the corruption and everything that happened in post-World War II America, and those are things we wanted to touch upon. And so the question now, and we won't say where we're going, but do we start immediately right after that? Do we jump ahead a decade? Is it a year? Like, where are we going to go with this? Who are the characters that we're going to bring along with us, and what's next for the city of New York and for these characters, because they are going to interplay back and forth. So there is going to be some change, but we want to keep the kind of flavor that we had, this kind of soft serialization that worked so well in season 1. But we're going to be bringing in other characters from the Lama's background, villains and allies and whatnot. A couple people will be taking a step back, not because any reason but to allow for these other characters to emerge. And there are going to be a couple surprises that are going to be coming down the pike. So we're just in the beginning process of deciding what that might be, although I think we have a pretty decent idea overall of the broad arc. It's going to be another 8 episodes is the plan, and that's going to definitely be on the plate. We're going to be wrapping up Queens of the Sapphire Sea Season 2 shortly, so that is going to be next, another 4 episodes of that, so it'll be a total of 15, and then we'll see where Radio Room goes from there.
Yeah, and I will say one thing about the Season 2 of the Llama. I think it was important for both Steele and I that, and he already touched upon like a status quo change. I think that's something that, it's a careful balance of making sure that like things change, things move forward, but also never losing sight of what makes that first season work. There are certain touch points. I don't think it's spoilers to say that our main inspiration for next season is Batman: The Long Halloween. It's something that we keep on going back to. We're definitely going to be bringing other characters in from, and still touch upon it already, like this sort of larger Green Lama universe, which I've established in the novels. Some of that's hinted at in this season. Certain characters that we name drop will be coming in. I think it was very important to us, and I think it is very important to us, that so often superhero stories have a illusion of change, and that is very effective and has been very effective for a very long time. But with the Llama, the way that he, at least how I've written him in his canon, is this idea of a character who will who will live a long time and experience change. He starts in the 1930s in my novels. He goes to the 40s. Now that we get to see him into the late 40s, we'll hopefully go back and see him in the war. What happens next? Like what happens in the 50s? What happens in the 60s and 70s and 80s? Like how does his cast change, and how does he change? And I think that's something we're going to be exploring in the next season.
I love that. I'm very excited for it. As far as I'm concerned, y'all have revitalized my love in audio drama. It felt very unapproachable for a while just because of how I listen. Like, I'm a big music nerd. Adam knows this about me. And so, like, I can casually listen to music, but often listening to music or listening to anything is an activity on its own that I can't do with other activities, and audio drama especially. But there's something perfect about the Green Lama, and I'm hoping, I'm very excited to dive into the Queens as well. But, like, that just it's engaging in a way that I felt like I'd lost from that kind of drama, and so I'm very excited. I love how cheeky it is. I love that you're not afraid to get goofy, but no one else, like, none of the characters are in on the joke. The audience is, but the characters play it straight from start to finish, more or less, and I love that. I also love playing the Where's Adam game in every couple of episodes, like what character he's playing, because sometimes you put on a voice or a shtick, but sometimes it's just kind of you there being a mook, and I love it. It's like, that's my friend Adam. He's a gangster.
There's a really fun cameo that you'll appreciate in the season finale. I'm not going to say who it is.
I can't wait.
But yeah, there's a few cameos that of people that I think you might know over the course of this season. But yeah, that I'm not that good of a voice actor, but I'll play around sometimes.
So before we wrap up, a question I've liked to ask my guests, especially over the last 2 years, is obviously we are still living through a global pandemic. Please get vaccinated. Please get boosted. Please wear a mask if you can, especially in New York, because we're on high alert now. Yay. But I like to ask my guests, especially during this time, there's been a lot of struggle and a lot of strife on many different levels for everybody through the pandemic. But I like to look at the silver linings and the good, and because a lot of good has come out of this time, even though it has not been the best. And I'm curious if you and Steele, Adam going first and then Steele, if there's like a moment or a thing that really came out of the pandemic that is like your silver lining, your great moment that couldn't have otherwise probably happened.
The Green Lama. It could not have happened without the pandemic. Basically, my day job is I work for Condé Nast, and we produce I produce celebrity interviews for a living, which is a very weird job, and it's very stupid, and I love it, and it's great, but it's also really stupid. But we were producing a lot of things remotely, and at the beginning of the pandemic, I think Steele and I, we never really said it, but I think we were like, well, Queens of Sapphire Season 2 and Green Lama Season 1 probably will never happen. But I was producing things remotely for a good portion of it with just iPhones and Zoom recordings. And I kind of said to Steele, like, Steele, if I can do this, we can do audio drama. And to not get too deep into it, the Green Lama kept me sane. It was one of the most... one of the best experiences of my life, and I'm so grateful to it. And I'm so grateful for Steele, and I'm not saying this because he's here, but it got me through literally the darkest period of my life, because it's and you'll see that, I think, as the season goes on, because I definitely wrote the last few episodes were written during 2020, and a lot of like what I was going through was going into that. The Llama is literally the greatest thing that could have happened to me during the pandemic, and I'm so grateful that it's touching you and it's touching others, because it gave me strength in a very, very difficult time.
I love that. What about you, Steele? Something else wildly different?
So, I mean, I won't downplay the Llama, but I will say this pandemic has shown to people that you don't need to be in LA to make production work. The Llama is a perfect example of that we had so many people all across the country in different countries recording, and I've worked on things remotely through that. I had a friend who was up for a gig. I won't say the show, but it was up for a gig on a show, and they said, you have to move out to LA because we're only doing an LA room. And even when I heard that, I'm like, that's such a stupid thing. You don't need to have that kind of room. This isn't the 1960s where you're churning out episodes every week. You don't need that anymore. And then the pandemic hit, and that show came out, and it really hasn't done as well as people would have hoped, because they purposely limited themselves. Now, I'm hearing from students and I'm hearing from colleagues that they're getting gigs all over the place. That, whereas before they were really limited. If you're, you have to be in LA, maybe New York or Vancouver, but it's otherwise that's it. You just think about how Atlanta has exploded, how all of these different production facilities have gone up. And yes, technology helps out a lot. You can shoot an entire science fiction show like The Mandalorian on a soundstage now, where that would have been prohibitively expensive before. But also, just the opportunities are all over the place. You can connect with anybody. You can create comic books. I've never met the artist for my comic book. He lives in Poland. We got together and we're producing that together. I've only met some of the actors on my own show a handful of times. It very, very limited. And so I think that's shown that with modern technology, with modern techniques, and with one's imagination, you can really create a lot. And if you're trying to create art, if you're trying to create something that's an expression of your soul, like that will see you through. I'm not going to say that Queens of the Sapphire Sea is, I mentioned Thomas Pynchon. I'm not going to say it's like high art, but it's something that it's a story I really wanted to tell. And as Adam said, at the very beginning of the pandemic, all the production problems, I had to reshoot or re-record multiple actors because the audio just wasn't up to snuff, and I almost gave up in the middle of the summer of 2020. I was like, this is just not going to happen. And very slowly and then quickly we came together and like, we're going to try and do this. We're going to push ourselves through, and it worked, and we came up with some great stuff, stuff I'm really proud of. I like all the Green Lama, but I'm a homer. I love my own episode, the one that I wrote, which is episode 3, which is with Eddie Hangnail. It just like that. I wrote that, and I was like, if I could write an episode of Batman the Animated Series, this is the episode that I would write. And it just turned out great. And now I've got a calling card. I've got not only Queens of the Sapphire Sea, but the Green Lama as well, and all of these things that I've worked on through this. Technology has helped, and and just being able to do things from a distance, your imagination and your heart will see you through.
I love that so much. Thank you both so much for being generous with your time and chatting with me. I've been a fan from afar, and I'm so grateful that you guys took the time. I really encourage everybody to check out your work, starting with Adam and then Steele. Why don't you guys plug what you got going on, where folks can find you online? maybe not discuss whether you are or not canon to certain stories. We shouldn't really talk about that. But beyond that, why don't you plug your stuff?
Well, you can listen to the Green Lama on any of your favorite podcast apps, and if you really enjoy that, check out the entire series so far. That's on Amazon or your favorite bookseller. Basically start with Green Lama Scions or Sherlock Holmes and the Green Lama or Green Lama Unbound. There's a lot of really great stuff. I have a comic book short that's coming out next month from Heavy Metal. It is the biggest publisher I have ever worked for. And in September, I don't know exactly when, my graphic novel Sons of Fire is going to be coming up. At least they tell me, from Fire's Comics. It is basically the origin of Superman by way of Stranger Things. And what else am I doing? You can also find me at Adam Lance Garcia on Twitter, where I do a lot of Star Wars countdowns and I harass my friend Patrick Willems, a friend of the show, and I also you can find me at Adam L Garcia on Instagram, and if you want to check out my work, go to Vanity Fair. That's my day job. And there's a recent Star Wars video that I may or may not have directed that is really good. Also, the Elizabeth Olsen video, Life Detector Test. That I produced that, and that broke 1 million views and kind of broke the internet. So check those things out.
What about you, Steele?
Yeah, so you can absolutely listen to Queens of the Sapphire Sea, which you can find at queens.buzzsprout.com, or if you just put it in your search bar of any fine podcatcher, it'll come up. Like I said, it's a 1930s seaplane adventure comedy. A lot of fun, 11 full episodes out. You can read my comic book, Arcane. Issues 1 and 2 are out in physical form. Issue 1 is out in digital form on Comixology or Kindle now. And the third issue is due to come out shortly, which is going to wrap that first arc. But we've got about 14 episodes in the can that we're going to be releasing over the course of the next year and a half. If you want to hear more nonfiction from me, I do a podcast called Building a Better Story World, which you can also find on podcatchers. My day job is helping to design transmedia and story worlds for big brands. I've worked on Halo, I've worked on Pirates of the Caribbean, Ninja Turtles, as I mentioned, lots and lots of things like that. And so I take you through the process of helping to build better story worlds, whether you're a comic book writer or a novelist or a screenwriter, creating these worlds that feel vibrant and have maybe story rules, yes, but also helpful tips for dialogue and creating secondary characters, so that if you're interested, you can pop in. I use a case study in every episode so that you learn how The Simpsons utilized secondary characters to help build out their world, and how through dialogue shows like Boardwalk Empire and the film Silence of the Lambs, how they use their dialogue to help build out the world so that it's not just static, so that these stories feel like they're a part of a much bigger universe. So check that out. I also I'm working on Ultraman. There's an episode of Ultraman Live Connection that is coming out that I co-wrote. So that'll be coming up shortly. Give that a look out, and you can find me at Words of Steel on Twitter. My website, steelefilipek.com, which I don't update nearly as much as I should, but you can contact me through that, and always happy to chat. If anybody's on LinkedIn, you can find me pretty easily to talk shop, talk story, talk audio drama, talk whatever.
Amazing. Thank you again, gentlemen, both so much for joining me. Before we go, I'm going to have you do my sign-off for the show. Before this show, I used to have a music podcast that's now on indefinite hiatus because I'll never say it's actually dead. But on that show, I created a saying that is, music is life and life is good. It's this idea, and you talked about it a bit in our wrap-up, about how when you're creating, when you're making something, even when life gets hard, it's not that bad. And I love having two guests because then I can just cue and direct you. Adam, if you can say music is life, and then Steele, if you can say and life is good, we will close the show.
Music is life.
And life is good.
That's it for this episode of CPOV Autographs. Our theme music is by Michael Kill. Our logo was designed by Case Aiken and Joey Amons. If you liked the show, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way to help us reach more listeners. Questions, comments, or guest recommendations? Email mr.matt.storm@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at CPOV Autographs. Thank you so much for listening.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.